Good evening, everyone, and welcome to SocialFlight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. We have a really exciting show for you tonight because it's going to focus on the T-51 Mustang, and our guest is John Williams, president of Titan Aircraft. So I'm very, very excited about that. Before we get started, though, just wanted to fill you in on a couple things. So first of all, some mechanics for the evening. There is a Q&A feature that is built into tonight's broadcast technology. All you need to do is post some questions there, and I'll do my best to either fit that into our conversation or ask your questions directly to John throughout the evening as we move ahead with that. Tonight's broadcast will be recorded, and it'll be available on SocialFlight's YouTube channel. Just search for SocialFlight, one word, SocialFlight, on YouTube, and you can find us there, as well as all the other programs that we've had so far. You know, we created SocialFlight Live in order to support general aviation during the crisis and even beyond. And it's really been a fantastic experience, and so many thousands of you have joined us for the program. And I really do appreciate that. And of course, we're here for you. And so I would encourage you also to register at socialflight.com and get the free SocialFlight mobile apps for Apple and Android devices. This is a great way for you to stay in touch with general aviation. We have literally tens of thousands of aviation events happening when you can get out there and fly. You see destinations, different places to go, and of course our Fly to Win challenge, where we continue to give away very, very cool prizes. We're right now giving away a Lightspeed Zulu 2 headset, and of course this is stuff that's all free. Great odds, great chance of winning. Just go out there, fly, automatically check in at destinations, and all of this will be there for you. And so let's get started with tonight's program, and I am very excited to welcome our guest, John Williams, to the broadcast. John started flying at 16 years old. At 18 years old, he got his license, so over 50 years of aviation behind him and over 10,000 hours of flying. Back in 1987, he started Titan Aircraft, and I've been out there. It's an amazing facility. It's so, so cool to see all the things you've got out there. And welcome, John. How are you doing tonight?
Real good, Jeff. Thank you for the introduction, and you're looking good.
Well, you know what? I think everybody looks good when they're inside their house and they have one of your products behind them.
There you go.
It's the perfect wall art or art for the center of the room, and I almost feel a little naked about it because, you know, we took the tail apart recently to get our avionics and some other parts in, so it's actually a lot more finished than it looks like.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
I'm sure you've heard it's like the whole process. So so John, do me a favor, like take me back in time and tell me a little bit about how you got started and how you migrated into owning and starting up an aviation kit aircraft manufacturer.
Oh, geez, that's kind of a long, probably boring story, but I started, I guess I always had the passion for aviation. And when I was younger, in the 60s, there weren't many aviation jobs. So I guess I was discouraged from actually starting a career in aviation, and that's why I pursued electronics engineering as opposed to aeronautical engineering, I guess. So but I always had the passion for aviation, and so through the years, I just would fly whenever I got the chance. But after I got married and had the kids, the first thing, well, I first had to build a horse barn for my wife. Then I was allowed to buy an airplane. So after that, I bought an airplane. And I bought a.
How do you own so that answers the question, how you own that airport out there. How do you own an airport? You own a horse farm for your wife first?
That's right. That's right. So anyway, so I just always had the passion. And I guess I was fortunate enough in the electronics business industry. A company building temperature control systems for injection molding, and that turned out to be very successful. So it allowed me to pursue my other desires, I guess, in And I had an opportunity. It was actually the CGS Hawk from Chuck Slazarchuk was the developer and manufacturer of the CGS Hawk. And in the 80s, he fell on hard times, was having a difficult time producing the airplane. I had purchased a building for my electronics business that I had some renters in when I purchased the building. Part of the building was rented out. And so that was when those renters finally gave up the ghost. They weren't really paying the rent anyway, and they finally went out of business. Then I had all this space, and it was actually Chuck's son worked for me in the electronics business, and so I got to know Chuck through that connection. And he was building the CGS Hawk. Well, back in those days, to be honest, I wouldn't even go near an ultralight. You know, it was like I'd see guys flying these weight shift things, and they'd say, "Hey, John, you got to try this." I don't think so. You know, it was kind of comical. And I'd watched a few mishaps with them that were a little appalling, to say the least. So. But when I looked at the CGS Hawk, I remember one time I did a lot of flying with it. In fact, I probably kind of set things up that way. I flew just about every day. So I came into the airport one day, and when I was getting out of the airplane, I looked across the ramp and I saw this little rag-covered airplane sitting on the ramp. And I went over and looked at it, and it was the CGS Hawk. But it had all conventional controls. I had a 2-cycle engine, but I thought, you know, I'd fly this thing. Well, it was probably a few weeks later, maybe a month later, the mechanic that did all the work on my airplane flew one of those into my backyard. And he said, "John, you got to try this thing." And I said, "Well, geez." I said, "What does it stall at?" He says, "I don't know, someplace in the 20s." And so I took off in that airplane, and I flew around that farm field chasing cows, and he just felt so safe because it would fly so slow. And so I figured, you know, I didn't care if the engine quit because it could land it anywhere. So it was just an eye-opening experience. It kind of put let's say I was flying so much at the time that the fun went out of flying. It was just, it was like getting in your car and driving your car. But this really put the fun back into flying. So that's how I got my interest in the light airplanes. And so probably over the next 6 months or so, I started talking to Chuck whenever I'd see him, and he was having difficulties, you know, putting the airplane back into production. So I had the space available in my building. So finally, I thought about it, and I said to Chuck one day, I said, "Hey, why don't I just manufacture these things for you?" And I said, "I don't want a partnership or anything." I said, I'll you know, if you have the, you know, the documentation on what you used to do, what it cost you to build, so forth, should give me that documentation. I'll evaluate it, and I'll give you a price. So we did that, and I think the year that I got together with Chuck, he had sold 3 airplanes, and over the next 3 years, we did 120 airplanes.
Wow.
So we in that,
so you basically became almost like the parts manufacturer for him, like on contract, just as if you were a sub.
But basically we did the whole thing. And in fact, I got, you know, I went to the air shows with them. I flew the airplanes in the air shows, like at Sun and Fun and Oshkosh and so forth. So we I got to know the industry, and I guess at some point I just decided I wanted to build my own airplane, and that's when I did the Tornado.
So let's pause there for 1 second, because I want to show people what we're talking about here on this. I'm going to go open up. So of course, I'm going to start with the teaser of where we're going, because the bottom line is, of course, this is the stuff that grabbed me, and this is the entrance to your factory there. But this aircraft, let me see if I can zoom in on that a little bit. This is your Tornado.
That's right.
And there's a couple of them we've got in here. We'll leave this one up here, and another one that's on even on float. So when we talk about the you know, the foundation of where you came from to create that Mustang, it starts with this guy, I guess, right here, that what we're talking about.
Yeah. And in fact, see, I always really had a passion for the Mustang, and at that same airport that Chuck was operating, or trying to operate out of, there was a Mustang base there. And I remember when that Mustang first moved in there, I think that the owner paid $75,000 for it, and it was probably back in the 70s. And but $75,000 was a lot of money then, and so it was still out of reach, even though it was $75,000 compared to today's prices. But the Mustang just kept increasing in price to a point where it was beyond what I could afford. So I guess I started thinking, well, probably the only way I'm ever going to get a Mustang is to build my own. And so probably back even when I got involved with the Hawk, my thoughts were, one of these days I'll learn how to do this and we'll build a Mustang. So that's really was the origin of the Mustang. And also from that time frame, the mechanic that did the work on my airplane also did the work on the Mustang, and he had the erection manual from the World War II erection manual, which is a manual about that thick.
Wow.
So I was able to copy that entire manual. So we used a lot of that, or I used a lot of that in the development of the Mustang.
Wow. So literally it was the man, you had access to a lot of the drawings for the Mustang itself.
Right. Mm-hmm. It was actually a repair. It was the field repair manual, but it has every component that's in the airplane, because it shows them how to repair bullet holes and so forth, and all of those sections. So yeah, it was very helpful in the development of the Mustang.
Well, let me bring up one of those pictures as well now, because I want to take people through a little bit, put that in perspective as well. And so, and give a quick little background here. So to everyone else out there, I met John 2-3 years ago, walking the shows at AirVenture, and my boys and I had been looking at aircraft for a long time about what we were going to build, and nothing really quite met the blow your mind, and I want to spend years and of my life just excited every time that I pick up a tool to go and work on something, until we stumbled across the Titan aircraft booth here with John. And I'll tell you that everyone can see, you walk up to this plane and it is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, everything about it, to photograph it, to look at it, it's one of those planes that you walk over to and you feel like you have to touch. And we'll come back to it with the other models that you've done as well. But it is just absolutely a stunning thing. And so that's how we launched ours. And so John, tell me more about the development itself of the aircraft.
Well, I guess at that point I started, thinking about the Mustang. I guess from the time that I really started doing the Tornado. The Tornado is a pretty basic airplane, so it was relatively easy. And I think that all of us, from a engineering standpoint, in the aviation industry, we pirate things from our predecessors. There's none of us are inventing the wheel here. We go on what's been done before. So you do a lot of that, but some of the things you do, you really don't even know why you're doing them. You just do them, and you learn that over time. So the Tornado was a very basic airplane. The things that I didn't like about the CGS Hawk, for example, is the CGS Hawk was an aluminum tube riveted together construction, and then it was covered with sailcloth, and it was a relatively flimsy construction, meaning that it was it wasn't stable. It would twist all over, and it would twist quite a bit in flight. So your control inputs, when you put aileron control input in, the wing isn't rigid enough to stay rigid. It actually twists in opposition to the aileron input. So it takes away some of the crispness of controls. Where so in the Tornado, it's a rigid wing. So the excuse me, the control inputs, when you put the aileron in, the wing doesn't move to compensate for that control input. So it's a very snappy, very quick response to the aileron inputs, and also to the elevator inputs. So that makes a fighter-like feel. And the Tornado is a very very agile airplane. It's a real nice flying airplane. So I felt that if I could, after the success that I had with the Tornado, I felt that if I could make an airplane that looked like the Mustang that flew as good as the Tornado, I'd have a winner. So
that's a good point.
Yeah, and I guess that's so that was really my the criteria that I had kind of established for myself. Of course, now the construction of the Mustang is much more complicated. You have tapered the Tornado is a Hershey bar wing, so you have one rib basically that you're making for the whole wing. They're all just repeats of each other, and where in the Mustang every rib is different, and so it's the manufacturing process is much more complicated. And so then therefore the development cost. Although I can't say that we had a huge. I think that I was able to develop both the airplanes for very little money. So
Right.
So the actual development cost was relatively small. And we did it in record time. The Mustang, for example, I think we talked a little bit about that before, but one of the things that happened or kept happening with the Mustang is the Tornado kept evolving. People wanted to make the Tornado bigger because the first two places were relatively small, and people are getting bigger all the time. So a lot of guys didn't fit, so they wanted me to enlarge it. I kind of fought that and finally decided, okay, we'll enlarge it. So we made a stretch version of the Tornado. But all this time, I really wanted to get going on a Mustang. these other
You're a victim of your own success. People wanted to keep working on that, and you wanted to. Can you slow down on that so I can build this new plane?
Yeah. So anyway, that happened, and it kept happening. So we probably put together, we'd mocked some things up with a fuselage, and there were things on the Mustang that I wanted to, that I had to try. For example, I built up a steel tube frame. Well, at first I was going to make it all monocoque, and then I saw all the trouble that Vans was going through with the monocoque construction on their fuselage, and they were actually, back in the 90s, there were more people they were selling fixtures for jigs and fixtures for building the Vans RVs than you could shake a stick at. So I decided, well, we don't want guys to have to go out and buy fixtures for building the Mustang. So I decided that a better way to do it was to go back to a semi-monocoque design, which is a steel frame, and then that steel frame would be your primary fixture, and then skin that with formers and the skin. Well, then I had to figure out, can I use let's say just flat sheets of aluminum and make the fuselage look like it should.
Mm-hmm.
And after doing a few mock-ups with that, I discovered that yes, yes, you can. You can because there's on the Mustang, there's very little in the way of compound curves on the fuselage. There's a few places where you found compound curves, but for the most part, you don't.
So I'm going to show a few of those pictures as well, because you've talked about a few different areas of construction and methods, and that was one of the things I was really impressed by when we went into our build. So here's, of course, if just to reference the aircraft itself, and again, talk about like looking like the actual real thing. It's gorgeous, and it's amazing to see what the plane looks like, especially when you start seeing what's underneath in those construction. And so one way that I thought might be great to look at how this is built is just a few snapshots at what happened behind me right here. And so, you know, we started out, as you can see here, with what used to be a dining room of some sort, and then of course everything starts showing up in parts. But this is the part that you're talking about, right? This is the steel frame on a stand that comes from the factory, all done, welded, so you don't have to worry about jig. You don't have to worry about things being straight and true at this point. You know, you put a level on this, of course, just to make sure that everything's not twisted when you're about to start building it. But we went from that to what you can kind of see here of the tail going together fairly quickly. And if you look at some of the pictures in the factory, and I'll go back to some of these fixtures. So this is the spar and center section. Is that correct, John?
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of the things that I've always really enjoyed about this design philosophy is your philosophy seems to be that the critical parts of the aircraft, that frame, the center section, etc., and this is a center section here, this is how they come to the builder.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Just I think that the gear is actually, the wheels are installed also. The gear is in there, but the wheels aren't installed. But the wheels and brakes.
Good point. This is a bunch of them without the wheels and the brakes put on.
That's the way. And we do that, Jeff, because that's the heart of the airplane. If you make a mistake on that spar line, drill a hole in the wrong place, you've ruined it, and you've made an unsafe airplane. So we don't want you doing any drilling on the spar caps. The spar webs, you have a lot of latitude there, but on the spar caps, we don't want you. We don't want anyone in there drilling on that. We do that, but that's all CNC drilled, and we want all those holes in the right place.
Yeah, exactly perfect. And this is, again, in the factory. We'll go back and forth to some of these as we go. And the other thing, which there isn't a really good picture of, but here's an example of the vertical stabilizer, for example. Same thing. It comes done because in the factory you're building these parts.
That's right. Yeah, and the control surfaces and so forth. We save some rivets for you to put on there so that you can get some credit for building them. But we did, because with the tapered surfaces there, it's difficult to keep all that stuff straight, and the average guy doesn't have the equipment to keep it straight. So it's some guys would be able to do that in their shops, but most would find it very difficult. So we try to take the difficult things out of let's say help the builder with the difficult things.
Right. Now tell me a little bit about the other. What's that?
Not so much the tedious things. That we'll leave the tedious things for the customer.
You keep it safe, but keep yourself entertained and not doing you leave the boredom with guys in the field. So tell me a little bit about the other thing that's really interesting is the way that your wings, your tail surfaces are done follows what you mentioned with the CGS Hawk, which is those leading edges are also complete with the front spar when they come to you because they're wrapped foam core. So tell me about that structure.
Well, that structure really that came from actually the Earthstar Thunderball. That was they actually used foam ribs, and I was planning on using foam ribs, and I used foam ribs in the Tornado construction, but and then the leading edge skin is actually bonded on rather than riveted onto the ribs up front. Well, that gives you a much cleaner leading edge. It's still extremely strong. Well, on the tapered surfaces, the ribs were difficult to keep in place. In fact, I don't even think I tried it. I thought about it and I thought, well, geez, the weight penalty for going with just a solid foam core there for that leading edge with the proper shape is minimal. So I just cut foam billets, cut the D-cell leading edge, and then we wrap that with aluminum, and of course it's all bonded. So, and it makes it extremely strong. Now, I didn't include that in the calculations for the strength of the wing. The strength of the wing is strictly based on the spar and the spar caps. So there's considerable amount of added strength in that foam core D-cell, and it's considerable. You know, it's we loaded the. You know, the thing is about experimental aircraft in the U.S., we're not required to do any load testing. I think it's always a good idea to do load testing, but U.S. manufacturers are not required to do that to sell an experimental airplane. However, most of the rest of the world, like the UK, Europe, all of Europe, they require load testing on all structural components. Similar, in fact, they use FAR 23. So to get an airplane approved in the UK is almost like going through FAA certification program here. Probably not quite as clumsy, but it's the same. You have to run the same tests. You have to run the load test. So in order to sell the Mustang in Europe, we were required to do that. In Europe, has actually been a very good market for us for the Mustang because that's where they were primarily used. And I think that most of the free Europeans understand that the Mustang was probably responsible for them being free. So
it's probably more sentimental to them than us.
I've had some Germans come in and want to buy Mustangs too. but what were you saying, Jeff? Sorry.
It's fascinating that it's in some cases more sentimental to them than it is to us.
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, it is. You know, if you spend any time in the UK and you see all the old 8th Air Force Air Corps bases that they've turned into museums, and the people have done it on their own. It's not government supported, but they really appreciate what the Army Air Corps suffered to save their country. And, you know, no question about it.
So we have that, and as far as like different things, the other thing, of course, that you do that I don't want to go without showing as well as even the scaled propellers as part of the other part of your company is also done there from Whirlwind.
Right.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because you wouldn't think it's so easy to hold up a propeller there that it looks just perfectly in place on the aircraft, but it's pretty amazing to see.
You're holding that all by yourself, Jeff?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that propeller weighs 32 pounds, I think, just like that. So it's a light propeller. It's carbon fiber, hollow core carbon fiber, and it's actually it's Whirlwind. Jim Rust of Whirlwind Propellers is actually the propeller guru, and he's the one that designed it. Kind of a funny story there. When I started the development on the Mustang, I had seen an article on Whirlwind Propellers, Jim Rust, and he had built a two-blade constant speed propeller for the 912 that weighed 8.5 pounds, and it was it was a 69, I think it was 69 or 70 inch propeller. but it was, and he actually designed that. He was competing for the Predator. The original Predators were powered by the 914. So he was in competition to try to get that contract, and that's what he developed it for. So anyway, there was an article in one of the flying magazines. I can't, it was probably Kit Planes. Anyway, so I called Jim and I said, hey, I said, I need a 4-blade constant speed propeller for a Rotax engine. And I told him what I was doing. He says, sure. He says, when you get ready, let me know. He says, be happy to work with you on that. Now, he was selling that 2-blade propeller, I think, for $4,000 at the time. So I distinctly remember this. I asked him, I said, well, what do you think you'd sell a propeller like that for? I said, the 2-blade propeller's $4,000. I said, well, what would you sell the 4-blade propeller for? And he said, $8,000. He didn't even hesitate. But when it came time to, when I needed the propeller, I went to him, and he was so busy at that time that he said, John, he says, I can't do it. He says, I just, I'm too busy. I can't do it. There's no way. And he said that he didn't like working on the smaller propellers like that, the small hubs, because they were difficult to work with. And he had this. He said, I have to sell. He says, I sell that propeller for $4,000. He says, and I'm so busy with my other propellers that I'm selling for $6,000. And he says, and I have less work in them. And so he said, I don't know why I'd even want to do it. So I was really disappointed. And so the prototype, then I had to fly. I actually flew the prototype with the 912 with the Ivo 3-blade propeller for a while. Well, I actually flew that airplane to Copper State Fly-In from Ohio out to Arizona, and in the booth next to me, next to my booth, next to the Titan booth, where it was the Europa, and Europa was one of the companies that had bought his 2-blade constant speed propeller. So that was the first time that I saw one in the flesh. Otherwise, I'd just seen pictures. And I looked the propeller over real careful, and I talked to the owners, and they absolutely loved the propeller. But they had the same problem. Jim didn't want to make them anymore, and I guess he told them that if they came to him with an order for at least 10, then he'd do a run of 10. So then they got all excited when they saw me, because they said, well, you need a 4-blade propeller, so that's like only half as many to get 10 blades. So anyway, so we kind of worked up a friendship. Well, it happened that they were also based at El Cajon Airport in California, or at the El Cajon Airport, or at the airport in El Cajon, and they were neighbors really with Jim and where his shop is. So I gave them a copy of it. Was actually on VHS at the time, because that was probably in 2002. And I gave them a copy of one of our promotional videos, and I said, make sure Jim sees this. Show it to Jim, make sure he sees it. So they did, and I waited a couple of weeks, and I called Jim, and as soon as he got on the phone, he just started laughing, and he says, yeah, he says, neat airplane. He says, I'll make your propeller. So I think that first propeller, though, took about a year for it to make. But then we started getting the propellers, and then we developed a relationship, and it just happened that Jim at the time was needing to expand from a 3-man operation, and every time he tried to hire new employees, he had the typical difficulty of finding good employees, and they created more work for him than they saved, and so forth. So it's always hard to make that step from a small mom and pop shop to a larger company. And so he needed help. So he just approached, well, we probably discussed it with each other about us taking over the manufacturing for the for the constant speed propellers, because it was really the repair work that he was having difficulty with, because basically at the time, if you wanted to buy a propeller from him, he told you it was a 2-year lead time. If you didn't want to wait that long, that was fine with him, because he was as busy as he could be. Yeah. But when people were started bringing back their propellers for overhaul, and he had to drop what he was doing and service that customer, and that was what really kind of got him into difficulty with trying to satisfy customers. So at that point, we had, I think, we had something close to 60 employees between the two companies, and yes, I had the depth to do all of that. And I said, hey, we can do this, and it'll work out to both of our advantage. And so we started doing all of the constant speed propellers, and he was still he does airboat props, and then that also allowed him time to develop new propellers. And he's developed a new line of ground adjustable propellers that he now sells for the light airplanes. So and that's all been kind of recent developments that he's been able to do, because he didn't have to get in there and get his hands dirty. Jim doesn't never worry about getting his hands dirty, but he didn't have to get in there and do the service on service work on propellers coming back in for overhaul. So it's actually worked out to be a very good.
Yeah, I mean, the amazing part is, of course, it led to having those amazing propellers, and I should add, of course, not only they're lightweight, but they've got the nickel edge that's underneath that you can't even see underneath the black paint. It just really looks perfect on the aircraft, and so that's a great thing. And of course, we'll have an upcoming show talking more about propellers. Now going back to
of course the original propeller was it was only a 70-inch propeller. And then we went with this 84-inch, which is the big paddle blade that you were holding, and that we actually did we made that profile look just like the Hamilton Standard. Now, if you notice the stickers, the Whirlwind sticker we made look like a Hamilton Standard sticker, and we call it the Whirlwind Standard.
I didn't even notice that. I thought it was a Hamilton Standard look.
Yeah, the Hamilton Standard, that oval sticker, and colored the same way, and we just replaced that and called it the Whirlwind Standard.
Now, one of the questions that came in, if we go back a minute there, let's talk about engines, et cetera. But one of the things that came in had to do with that structural testing that you talked about. So what did you find during that testing that you've done? I mean, one of the things that you take a lot of pride in, and is I find very attractive about the aircraft, is how strong it is.
Yeah, well, really the only thing, in fact, some of it is kind of comical. That the head of the LAA, Francis Donaldson from the UK, actually came to our facility and spent 2 weeks here to monitor the tests, and of course he told me before we started that he was going to break the wing, and I said, well, I don't think you're going to break the wing, because the wing will meet or exceed all of the requirements, the weight requirements that we put on it. He says, no, he says, I'm going to break the wing. So he did.
Just what you want to hear for someone coming into your show.
So he did his best to try to break the wing, and he actually loaded it to. He didn't take out any of the weight for the landing gear or the fuel or anything else for the inertial relief. So it was loaded way beyond the limits. And I remember when he finally gave up, he looked at me, he shook his head. He says, I cannot believe it. He says, I can't believe that wing is holding up, that we had 12,800 pounds on that wing.
Oh my God.
And then
12,800 pounds on the wing. What about your designs of the fuselage?
Well, the fuselage, I don't think there was ever any issue about that. We had there was one of the more difficult tests, I guess. The engine loading was relatively simple. You have uploads, downloads, and then you have offset for torque. And I think that the download is like 2,600 pounds. And ultimate about 2,000 pounds limit load, and the uploads are considerably lighter than that, probably about 1,000 and 2,000 for limit and ultimate. And side loads, we were about 1,500 pounds for side loads. And so I never really had any concern about that. Some of the tail loads were higher than I really expected. I think we had about 1,700 pounds on the tail at one point, and the tail just didn't care. I mean, it was, and I know people will look at there are times when people look at the airplane, or we're pushing the airplane and they're handling it very carefully and say, "Can you push here?" So you can put 1,700 pounds on that tail. I don't think pushing on it's going to hurt it. And of course at the air shows, sometimes I'll jump up on the wing and walk right out to the tip of the wing.
Oh my God.
And they'll go, "Can you do that?" I said, "Yeah, you can do that." And you're really walking on if you stay spar to the on that leading edge, it's so strong that I don't know if you could, you're not heavy enough person on there to
I know we've had some times that we've talked about. I'll bring up one of the pictures here, and we've talked about where I've asked you questions about access panels and things like that, and you'd mentioned the strength of the fuselage frame itself, and then when you add the skins to it as well, it's almost like I think you had said that you considered the structure just in one of the two components, let alone both of them together. Can you tell me about that?
Well, I guess I had a customer, probably, I don't know, probably goes around to about 2006 or 7, that he was an aero engineer, and he looked at the structure, and he fell in love with the airplane. He looked at the structure, and he's saying, "Well, have you done a finite element analysis on it?" And I said, "Well, no, I didn't have the means to do a finite element analysis." And he said, "Well, he says, I got some buddies, he went to Texas A&M, and he said, I have some buddies that have access to the computer there, and we can probably do a finite element analysis." I said, "Fine, go, knock yourself out." I'd love to have that. So they did a finite element analysis on just the frame by itself without the skins. And I was surprised that how well that came out, because the analysis showed that after that there would be some weak some potential problem points at about 10,000 hours.
Wow, only about 10,000 hours, and that was without taking into account
any skin structure. So it was like, and they were still, it was still in the minor area. What you actually get from that as a result is a colored graph that shows, they have they model the structure, and then the analysis comes back with the areas colored. And the only areas that were going toward red were a few joints, like at the wing fittings and so forth on the fuselage, and that was at 10,000 hours, not before. So it was still probably viable at 10,000 hours without any skins, and then you add the skins, and it just So he was, I know he was surprised at that strength.
Yep.
But what we did do with that anyway is I did look at those joints. Then every point that ended up being red on that, I strengthened.
So that's been,
I
so that's
I
already
just
been,
I
that's
just
already
couldn't
been
help
taken care of.
I just couldn't help myself. So I mean, it didn't take much to do it. So it was so we put gussets in all of those areas.
So let's talk for a minute for the folks that are considering purchasing, one of these planes and what it would take to build it for them. And what do you tell people? I'm bringing up the right pictures right now. What do you tell people who are thinking about building it in terms of what the commitment is, what the hours are, what the costs are, et cetera?
Well, of course, things keep getting more expensive. I guess initially I wanted to be able to build this for less than $100,000. I think now we're probably a little over that. So from a cost standpoint, from a time commitment standpoint, I've had guys build the airplane completely in 1,600 hours and have a nice build. Now, does the average guy do that? Maybe not, uh, but it's doable in that period of time. So we call it a 1,600-hour build, and again, it depends on how carried away you get with things. So, for example, if you just do all pulled rivets, that keeps it simpler. Some people want to go with flush rivets, with driven rivets, and that adds considerable amount of time. So it depends on the individual and just how they work. So there's a wide range of methods that in work habits that change that time
Right.
that time.
I can certainly say from experience, yes, you can get caught up in anything that you choose to. So for people out there, of course, again, in terms of construction, it is all pulled rivets, meaning pop rivets.
Right.
It's done with an adhesive that that has hat sections that sandwich over parts of of that frame when you're doing the fuselage part of it. And so it is the main structure, as you mentioned, John, is very straightforward in terms of kind of how to go about the aircraft itself. But that's what you get hung up on, right? I mean, I think we decided, oh, hey, we're going to put a glove box in over here, and we probably spent, a whole week of time, like, crafting the glove box and sourcing the latch for the glove box and getting everything all set up. So, and let me tell you, we're really, really proud of our glove box. But
but that's part of the fun. That's part of the fun. I mean, you put your own little touches on it. It's and there people could really come up with some good ideas. So when people do things like that, I mean, there've been a lot of ideas that I've gotten back from customers on improvements really in the plane. I don't know that we've really done anything structurally, but I think from the standpoint of ideas on making it more user friendly or whatever, someone came up with the idea of putting an armrest, a fold down armrest. The cockpit's relatively narrow, so you don't have a lot of room for you don't want to intrude on the occupant's space, but you can put a fold up armrest that, once you're in there, you can fold the thing down and have something to rest your arm on. So we've incorporated that, and it's some things that people can do, and things to make the airplane look more like the original interior wise, like the side panels, K-14 gun sight.
So you've got that. Let's talk about that for a second, because you showed that to me last time I was out there, and
people can see that.
Oh yeah, no, we can see that. And so you actually have there a 3D printed gun sight.
Right. This is the K-14 gun sight that was used on the Mustang, and it's a 3/4. We scaled it down and printed it 3D. And it's actually a customer that did this one. I had John Michael here working on doing that, but the customer actually did this one. And of course, then the other thing is we've had, and I think I showed you that YouTube video where
Yep.
there's a guy with a Sonex that made a video or did a gun sight with machine guns.
Right. So for all of you out there, go to YouTube when you have a chance after the show, look up K14 gun sight. And one of the videos that'll come out is some software that someone did using of something like the 3D printed one that John's got right there, that literally lets you go and play using your own aircraft as a video game, shooting and tracking targets.
Right.
It's pretty wild, and I think it's a little more appropriate to be done in a Mustang.
Yeah.
So John, one of the things when someone's considering building an aircraft,
Mhm.
they're aside from deciding on the mission and what you're looking at for a plane, it's interesting that different aircraft manufacturers have very different philosophies of building in terms of what is the role of the builder. And some that are here's a set of plans, and it's going to be a long, tough job.
Don't deviate at all from the plans. Yep.
Well, actually, I was thinking like, here's a set of plans, do it, go for it, because we're not giving you any parts. All the way to some very, very, very refined aircraft out there, very, very popular aircraft that are what you just said. Don't deviate. Don't deviate. And this is it. You're making the plane as is. We've thought it all out. It's safe as is, and leave your creativity at home. You're somewhat in the middle because all of those critical structures are taken care of, but there's a lot of things, whether it be how do you want to heat or cool the aircraft, what do you want to do for baggage storage, how do you want your cockpit to kind of look and feel inside. You leave a lot of that up to the owner.
Yeah, and probably and some of it, let's say that we've had people install engines that I've tried to talk them out of, and and sometimes I feel that so I understand the guys that say, hey, don't deviate, because you can if I see someone going down the wrong path, then I try to say something. If on the other hand, if you're too rigid with that, then there might be something good that could come along that you're going to miss out on. So I guess I try to keep an open mind with that. But if I feel pretty strongly that it's going to be unsafe, I'll say something. If on the other hand, if it's something that I can wrap my head around and think that it's a safe thing to do, I encourage it.
So let's talk about engines for a minute, because I don't want to miss that as our time's ticking through. This is the V8 engine, and you've done a V12 as well, but this tends to be, I think, the mainstream at the moment is the Chevy V8, the LS3 engine, and you do that with the gearbox and that prop that we showed before. This seems to be, from everything I've heard from you, a pretty bulletproof setup.
Yeah, I really think that this engine, it's a great engine. The good thing is that you're running it. I guess I feel you're not laboring this engine. This engine's capable of putting out 430 horsepower. We're not using that 430 horsepower. We're maybe using close to 300 horsepower at takeoff. In fact, I want you to keep it under 300 horsepower. But it's in cruise, you're using it at maybe 50% power, 50 to 60% power. So it's not like the smaller engines, like the Suzuki would be a good example. The Suzuki, I felt that we were running that engine so hard. I always felt like we were abusing that engine, running it, cruising it at 4,200 RPM. So that's why I wanted to go to a little more displacement, like the Honda. In the Honda, we were able to cruise at, let's say, 3,600 RPM. Some guys were cruising them at 3,400 RPM. But I felt I was pretty happy right around the 36 to 37. And but then the Chevy, you're able to run at 3,000 RPM, and I think that engine will last a long time at 3,000 RPM, probably more than the average guy's going to fly in a lifetime.
So, I mean, that, automotive engine conversions do not have a great reputation in aviation. And it seems like you've been pretty successful with a lot of these flying. And is that the key? Is it the D rating that you think is the key?
Well, yeah, I think it's really experience. The reason that aircraft, I think, automotive engine is every bit as good as an aircraft engine, probably better. It's more refined. There's a lot more of them made. They're more precisely made. But the installation is where the problem is, and let's say we don't have tens of thousands of these engine installations where someone else has been the guinea pig and found the problem, the thing that's gonna break, and it's usually a fuel line or an oil line or it's not the engine itself that goes bad, it's an accessory that goes bad. And so that's I think that's the key. So the more experience you have, the more identical installations that you have, the better off you are, and that's because from that there's that experience that shows up the problems that you fix along the way.
What about the PSRU, the gear reduction unit?
I think we've been very fortunate with that. The Neil Heinz of SocialFlight in New Zealand made the first ones for us, and we're basically using that same design to this day. I did have him make a heavy duty one for the high horsepower. There was, at one stage we were looking at racing the Mustang, and then we were looking at using 600 horsepower. So I actually had a gearbox made that would handle 650 horsepower, and we also did a prop that would handle 650 horsepower. Well, those items ended up so heavy that I really don't want to use them on the airplane, and because we'd have to really the load by the time you take care of, you're putting that weight out on the nose of the airplane, and now you've got to go back and add weight to the tail to compensate for that. So now you're adding that weight twice, and it's then that's up in the whole gross weight of the airplane and the structure from landing gear, landing loads, so forth. You're just going to increase the maintenance on the airplane, and it also is going to increase stall speeds, which affects safety.
Right. Well, it is kind of a really beautiful installation, as you can see from here. And of course, you also did and as you can see, there's dummy stocks. Someone asked a question about pictures. Those are, it looks right. It certainly sounds the part. And those are dummy stacks at the very front and rear. It's really the four in the middle that are actually putting out exhaust on there. And then of course you did the BMW True V12 that you've got there as well.
Yeah. The V12 is really kind of neat because it is a V12. It's 300 horsepower max, or 326 horsepower.
So you actually have more power out of the V8 than the V12, but you've got the actual 12 cylinders on that.
Right. And the V12.
John, I wanted to show before our time was up. One of the things is when you have when you have an aircraft that's this fun and exciting to do, and a replica, there's a lot of things you end up doing with the plane once you have it that that you just don't do in other planes. And one of the things is one that I got to experience with you not that long ago, coming out there, and it's the D-Day Ohio. And this is, we've got some pictures of this. This is an amazing event that happens in Conneaut. Ohio, right? And they've got a beach there that looks like the landing. It looks like Omaha Beach.
Looks like
Um,
Omaha Beach.
it is amazing, and you've got thousands of reenactors, incredible heavy equipment, and then everyone looks to the air, and the favorite part of that show, here comes like a drop plane, but the really amazing part of that show is right here when those Mustangs come in, and you've been flying in this show for quite a while, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I've actually was doing this before I even did the Mustang. We used to fly anything that we could when they were, and of course the show was much smaller then. I think when we started flying the Mustangs in the show, it made the show, and it's really taken off since that time. And that was probably around 2003. And and of course we did this initially probably without the FAA approval.
Hold on, let me cover the mic for that.
Yeah, then I guess we did it for a couple of years, and I thought, well, we've got to get the FAA involved in this because we're going to get in trouble otherwise. And it's a good thing that we did because they had already been their antenna was up. They were looking out for us. And
you got that? Oh, we're glad you called.
That's interesting that we were bringing that up because. And it happened that the guys that were probably most against it got totally involved in it, and they love it. They're up there. In fact, one of the guys is flying the B-25 now. So he was one of the original FAA guys that was kind of against it originally. There's some funny stories that go along with that whole thing, but it's a fantastic reenactment. They have, we do about an hour of strafing the beach at, well, in fact, the first year before the FAA got involved, we were coming over the beach probably at about 10 feet. The FAA got involved. They said, you can't do that. So they wanted us to come down the shoreline the way you saw it. And originally we were limited to 250 feet. Well, I think the first year that the FAA on-site guy he got on the radio with me and he said, hey, you can come lower. You can come lower. So pretty soon we were down to about that 10 feet, but it wasn't over any people. And we tried to do that originally, but we didn't have any control over the crowd. When the FAA got involved, they have control over the crowd, so you only have essential personnel that are put at risk. So the reenactors are considered essential personnel, so we're allowed to buzz them.
Yes, and I want to say thank you for making us essential personnel when we came out there, because that helped as well to see that. And
you got some good video of that, and I think that you even posted.
We did, and so for anyone who's watching, if you want to see a truly amazing video, go out on our YouTube channel. Again, just go on YouTube and search for SocialFlight, and look for D-Day Ohio in our list of videos. It's from probably at this point a year or two ago, and it's an amazing video we put together. Shows the entire event and shows the Mustangs coming overhead. And let me tell you, from being there on the ground and listening to the crowd, people love seeing the landing craft that you see here. They love seeing the reenactors, all the gunfire, all the tanks and things like that. But what they're really there for are when the Mustangs arrive. And seeing those Mustangs come in formation and start doing these strafing runs, it makes the hair on your arms stand up, on the back of your neck. It's amazing. And to me, it wraps all of this up, because the idea that you can build this aircraft yourself, that you can go and create something that not only can you have the satisfaction of having built yourself, have the aircraft, have all the fun that you can go, bursting holes in the sky and drilling holes through clouds and doing rolls and loops and everything the plane can do. But the idea that you can also go and participate in events like this, is just amazing. And I understand, John, that people can they can work with you
Oh, yeah.
when they have completed aircraft and come out there and fly at the event.
We have customers all the time. In fact, I think when you were there, we had a couple of customers that were flying with us. The other thing is, and just to tell the audience that it is, you know, I do a lot of flybys for veterans at funerals. Again, it's not something that see, that becomes a waivered event. Anytime you do something with one or more person on the ground, and if it's scheduled, if it's prearranged, it's a waivered event. So you have to have an FAA waiver in order to do that. So to do a flyby for a funeral, but there's no way of getting a waiver for that because there's not enough time allowed. When someone dies, they're buried. The burial is too soon after the passing to be able to set everything up for the waiver, because the FAA has to have someone on site and so forth. So we've been working hard with the FAA to try to get a blanket waiver set up so that we can do flybys for veterans. But what I have found, and again, I'm saying this probably out of school here, but what I have found is that we've done this many times, and it's even been reported on the news, and I can say that typically people look the other way.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're just
wouldn't get away with that with any other airplane.
Right. That's right. Don't do this in your Piper.
I've had towers come on the radio when we're flying through airspace, and we don't want to fly around it, so we call to get a clearance to go through the airspace. Towers say, "Hey, can you come down and give us a flyby?" And we'll fly right by the tower, just as close as we can.
Oh man, that's just amazing. Well, you know, again, it just opens up so many things. We're very excited to be working with you, and I'd encourage anybody who has any questions, of course, go to titanaircraft.com. That's the website to get more information about it. There's so many questions, of course, that we can't answer in our very limited time here at the show. But I just wanted to give people an opportunity to meet you, John, and to see a little bit about what's behind the aircraft and what goes from beginning to end and allows you to do things like fly in shows like that. And so I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight.
It was my pleasure.
Really great.
And we'll have to do it again. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. So for everybody else out there, again, titanaircraft.com to get more information about that, as well as you can also contact them for Whirlwind Aviation for the propellers, and we will have an upcoming show to talk all about propellers for all different types of aircraft. As well. And of course, you can also reach out to us here at SocialFlight. We'll answer some more questions and continue to give you updates on how our build is going of our T-51D Mustang. And so until next time, we have some great shows coming up. We are off next week for the election, and then we are back to lighten the mood for everyone. Rod Machado will be here. He's going to be joining us on November 10th, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Just a great icon of aviation. Should be a great night. On the next week, Tuesday, November 17th, we have an evening of cool tools. And let me tell you, John was talking earlier about you can do all sorts of things that you get caught up in. Well, one of the things that you can easily do is become a tool addict. And we will talk about all sorts of cool tools that we have found and used in our build here of our T-51D Mustang. And then at the end for the beginning of Thanksgiving week on November 24th, Dale Clapmeyer is here, and we'll be talking all about the saga of Cirrus and everything that he has been doing as well. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thanks, John. I appreciate all of your time and everything that you do for us and for General Aviation. And until next time, for everyone out there, I wish you blue skies.